All right, what's happening, y'all? It's your boy Rico from Street Scores, and man, we got to talk about everything that just went down last night in that terrible loss that we just had against the Bears. Commanders versus Bears, full breakdown and preview. Y'all know me, Rico of Street Scores. We're going to go position group by position group. We're going to talk about all of the coaches, too, all of the relevant coaches. We're going to talk about Rivera for a long time. We're going to talk about Eric Bieniemy and what he did wrong. I know a lot of people saw, our offense at times looked great, but overall it was not a good game from them or Sam Howell. So we got to talk about Sam Howell as well. But before we get to that, we got to talk about Jack Del Rio, Eric Bieniemy, all of those guys. We got to talk about each position group again, like I said. So quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, defensive line, cornerback, linebacker, safety, and even special teams. We got to talk about everything. And I have so many crazy stats, so many unbelievable stats to where, like, even after that game, I didn't know it was that bad. Like, losing 40-20 to the Bears that was 0-4 coming into that game is not the worst of it at all. The way we lost, the way it felt watching it wasn't the worst of it at all. When you start to see some of these stats, it basically how the Commanders were so bad. They were like historically bad last night. Like, they did things last night the teams haven't done in years types of thing. It's terrible. So we're going to dive into that. It's both offense, both defense. It's absolutely atrocious. And we got to question Ron Rivera. Is he fit for the job? We got to question Jack Del Rio. Is he fit for the job? I know Eric Bieniemy and Sam Howell. I know we're only 5 weeks into this new offense and stuff like that. But again, they weren't very good. We got to question them a little bit. Also, we got to talk about the fact that Emmanuel Forbes was benched. And why, even benching them didn't really help us much. And then, of course, with Emmanuel Forbes getting benched, our first round pick, we got to take a look at how bad this 2023 draft class is so far. I know you try to wait until like 2-3 years down the road to really judge a draft class. But right now, this is looking like one of the worst draft classes the Commanders have put together, at the very least since Ron Rivera has been here, and you can argue of all time. Now, again, I still have faith in some of these players to contribute at some point down the road, but as of right now, initially 5 weeks into the season, one of the worst draft classes we've ever seen, man. It is crazy. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. I appreciate all y'all that pulled up to the live stream last night, especially a lot of y'all that stuck through the entire game. Even as bad as that game was, a lot of y'all stayed until the fourth quarter hit 0:00. So I'm really proud of y'all. Shouts out to y'all, man, because hey, man, now that was a tough stream. I really appreciate y'all being there. And of course, I will be live streaming not this upcoming game against the Falcons because I'm trying to go to that game. Maybe I can live stream for a little bit from that game. But I'm mostly just going to be a complete fan. I'm not going to be like the analyst that I normally am. Of course, me being at the stadium, I'm going to have actually a pretty good all-22 view. So that's going to help in certain ways, like as far as evaluating the secondary and things like that. And like evaluating the wide receivers because typically you can't see that stuff on TV. But overall, I'm just going to be a straight fan. So then I'll come back with another live stream for that game against the Giants the following week. But make sure y'all stay tuned. And if you want to support the channel, make sure you donate to $RicoScores. That's the Cash App. All of the information to how to support the stream is in the description of this video, every live stream, all of that. Without further ado, man, let's get it.
You tell your family you can be a commander.
All right, so I feel like it's only fitting to start with Ron Rivera. With Ron Rivera's situation, it's either you start with Ron Rivera or you finish with Ron Rivera. I feel like let's just go ahead and get it out the way. Because Ron Rivera is going to be a nice chunk of this video, man. I have so many crazy stats to present to y'all. It's like, man. First of all, I want to point out the fact that Greg Stroman Jr., ex-Burgundy and Gold player, had an interception and a sack against us. Now, granted, the sack was like a delayed blitz. They disguised it very well. So it was tough on Sam Howell and the offensive line to even realize that he was potentially blitzing. But, hey, man, that boy Greg Stroman, revenge game? Let's get it, man. Hey, shouts out to him for going crazy against his former team that a lot of people doubted him, especially our fan base, and he goes out there and balls out against us. All right, now, so Ron Rivera, let's get to it. Well, the Bears doubled the Commanders' points. They put 40 on us. We were only able to put 20 on them. That's a shame. The Bears had lost 14 straight games, and they went into FedEx Field last night and whooped the Commanders in front of a sellout crowd. Ron Rivera, step into my office. I mean, this is the first Bears win since 346 days ago. Basically, ever since the last time the Georgia Bulldogs have lost a game was the last time the Bears won a game. I mean, Lord have mercy. The Commanders have been outscored 44-17 in the first quarter so far this season. That's not good. That's not good. It doesn't matter who you're playing. I don't care if we played the Bills and the Eagles. I mean, what difference does it make when you play the Bears and the Cardinals and you're getting outscored in the first quarter? Like, what difference does it make? So just to break it down, the Commanders' first quarter differentials right now, we're negative 27 in points, which is 30th in the NFL. We're negative 29 in passing yards, which is 17th in the NFL. We're negative 213 in rushing yards, which is 27th in the NFL. We're negative 7 in explosive plays, which is 30th in the NFL. And we're negative 4 in sacks, which is 29th, tied for 29th in the NFL. That's terrible. That's terrible. That's both offense and defense. So a lot of things that, you know, it takes the offense and the defense to be terrible at the same time. We're going to put that in Ron Rivera stats. When it's purely defense, we'll talk about it during Jack Del Rio's part. When it's purely offense, we'll talk about Eric Bieniemy's part. But when it's both, we got to take a look at Ron Rivera, man. And again, to be ranked 30th in at least 2 differential statistics, both points and explosive plays in the first quarter of games, we preached this whole offseason about getting off the fast starts, unlike how we've done so far under the Ron Rivera regime. And if anything, we're worse this year than we've been any other year as far as getting off the fast starts. It's actually quite incredible. Also, the negative 51 point differential through 5 weeks that we have is absolutely crazy. Like, having 2 wins with a negative 51 point differential through 5 weeks is insane. Having a negative point differential sounds like you're winless, period. Like, just, you know, if you're looking at the stats, just base stats on the surface. But the fact that we're negative 51 point differential and we have 2 wins is fantastic. We should literally be 0-5. I mean, the way we just lost to the 0-4, well, now 1-4 Bears, you would think we should be 0-5 according to at least power rankings. I'm pretty sure we're gonna plummet, nosedive on every power rankings you look at this week. If I were y'all, I wouldn't even go look at them. You know, maybe after the Eagles game, we went up a little bit because we played them very respectably. We left that game with our pride. Even though we didn't leave with a win, we left with our pride. We left with nothing this game other than some pink slips and some key cards that shouldn't work. But also, speaking of through the first quarter, Washington had 1 reception for 4 yards to Logan Thomas. DJ Moore already had 4 catches for 126 yards and a touchdown. That's terrible. That's as bad as a first quarter can get. That's literally as bad as it can get. And again, before we even dive into everything else, before we get to more statistics, remember, this was a majority backup offensive line for the Bears, and then pretty much an entire backup secondary, really, other than like Jaquan Brisker and maybe one other person, because they already had injuries coming into that game. Eddie Jackson and Jalen Johnson were already hurt before we got into that game, and as the game went on, they got like another 3 DBs that got hurt during the game, and I'm not even sure if they returned, and if they did, they were banged up when they did. So there's absolutely no excuses. You can complain about our injuries, but the Bears were the way more hurt team in that game. Going into the game and throughout the course of that game, they had way more players get hurt than we had. So there's literally like no way to even find an excuse. And it sucks because if you look on the screen right now, the Bears were the only team that haven't won an NFL game. The only professional franchise. This is like NFL. This is soccer. This looks like baseball. This looks like basketball. It looks like every professional sports franchise has at least won a game since Elon Musk bought Twitter back in October 2022, except for the Bears. And now that team right there that you see on this graphic just got a win against us. I mean, this is like the lowest of the low. It doesn't get worse than this. Also, 14 losses in a row for the Bears, and you come in on a short week on the road and then absolutely dominate the Commanders is, first of all, shouts out to y'all, but more so a reflection of how bad we just were. This is easily the most embarrassing, I feel like, loss under Ron Rivera. I mean, we've had some pretty bad ones. That Browns game last year felt like it hurt. None of them hurt worse than this. The only reason the Bears game felt like it hurt, the only angle you could put on that Bears game was the fact that we were that close to making the playoffs, and that pretty much ended our playoff hopes. Losing to the Bears doesn't statistically end your playoffs hopes, but if you can't beat the Bears, who can you beat on the rest of the schedule? And we'll get to that a little later. So it feels like we're pretty much done. I mean, it just feels like the season is over. Even though you're 2-3, you never know. Some miracle, you go undefeated for the rest of the season. You not only make the playoffs, you're probably the number 1 seed, number 2 seed. So statistically, it's not over. But if we keep playing how we played against the Bears, we're not going to beat anybody. We're going to end up with a top 3 pick. Forget 3 losses. How about the number 3 pick? So man, hey, Josh Harris, your hands are full right now. Also, the last time the Commanders were outscored by 54 points over consecutive home games was way back in 2022 under Steve Spurrier. Again, we're doing things this season, most notably in that game last night against the Bears, that we haven't done in like several years, 20 years, like historical type of stuff. We're historically bad. On the first possessions of games this season, Washington's offense is averaging 1.4 points per game, which is 21st in the league, and 1 touchdown out of the 5 games. And the only time we scored a touchdown on our opening drive was against the Eagles, arguably the toughest defense we went against. So, I mean, we're just backwards. We're just a backwards team. Arguably the toughest defense we've gone against all season. That's the only time we scored a touchdown on our opening drive. The defense is allowing a league worst 4.8 points per game, 24 points on the opening possession right now. The defense is terrible. The offense is really bad. The defense is worse. Like, the offense is somewhere in the 20s. The defense is literally league worst in a lot of categories. Just to put it in perspective. Again, so if it's offense and defense doing terribly, we're going to talk about it during this Ron Rivera section. Also, the Commanders through the first 5 games during the Rivera era. Year 1, we had a 1-4 record with a negative 33-point differential. Year 2, we were 2-3 with a negative 32-point differential. Year 3, we were 1-4 with a negative 38-point differential. And this year, we have a 2-3 record with a negative 51-point differential. We have our worst point differential through the first 5 weeks during the Rivera ever. Like, since he's been here through the first 4 seasons, this is the worst start we've had. Not record-wise, because again, we've started 1-4 twice. We've now started 2-3 twice, which is technically better. But point differential-wise, this is the worst it's ever been. Which is incredible since Ron Rivera's gotten here. Also, JP Finley, good question from him at the end of the game in the press conference. He asked, does having a little extra time with the Thursday game give you a chance to look at more wholesome differences than if you would in a regular week? And Ron Rivera took a huge pause and said, to a degree, yes. So basically, JP Finley saying, all right, you had a short week going into the Bears game. Now you have a long week going into the Falcons game. Are you considering potentially looking at staff changes? You know, firing Jack Del Rio, maybe firing yourself. You know what I'm saying? And basically, Ron Rivera's like, I mean, yeah, technically we do have more time to look at stuff, but we'll see. And then it already came out this morning. They've already decided on Friday. We don't play another game until like 11 days from now, 10, 11 days from now. And Ron Rivera's already decided by the morning after that terrible loss that we will not make any changes to this coaching staff at all. Even after starting out 2-0 and now being 2-3 after 3 straight losses. And Rivera, when asked about whether he would make changes during this evaluation period, he said no and basically cited the fact that it was only 5 games into the season. And I mean, I can see the logic there, but you also got to remember, like, I know we got 12 games left, and that's basically the quote he said. We still got 12 games left to play. Anything can happen type of thing. But let's look at the 12 games we have left to play, because this is a rough 12-game slate, man. If you couldn't beat the Bears, who out of any of these opponents can you beat? So you got the Cowboys twice. You got the Dolphins. Again, I said the top 4 teams in the NFL are the Bills, the Dolphins, 49ers, and the Eagles. We already played the Eagles once. We got to play them again. We got to play the Dolphins and the 49ers, and we already played the Bills. I definitely feel like we eventually, by the end of the season, will have played the 4 best teams in the NFL. At least 4 of the top 6 best NFL teams. It's crazy. And then the Rams are way better than people expected. Shouts out to my Georgia Bulldog, Matthew Stafford, going out there balling out. That boy Puka's going crazy. And by the time we play the Rams, Cooper Kupp should probably be back. I mean, if you can't beat the Bears, how do you expect to beat them? And then even the Giants, they're winless right now. But the way that we played against the Bears, I'm not confident going into those games. So that Falcons game, we need to go in there and do something. We need to win by like 20-something to make me even feel relatively confident about going into that Giants game the week afterwards. And also, shouts out to my boy Josh Taylor on Twitter. I've shouted him out all the time in my videos. He brought up a great point. I have honestly no clue what Ron Rivera actually does. He says the coordinators are in charge of their group, so Jack Del Rio controls everything defense. Eric Bieniemy controls everything offense. And he said at halftime that he didn't even talk to the players. They talked to each other. So what does Ron Rivera actually do? I mean, when you really sit back and think about it, I mean, at first he was like the Bill Belichick. He was making all of the personnel decisions and stuff like that. And then he brought in Martin Mayhew, Chris Polian, Marty Herney, all of those guys to kind of divvy up those responsibilities as well, to kind of delegate some of that work to them. So he's not like the full-blown GM. Now, he may be the guy that signs off on it last, but Martin Mayhew's doing most of the work now as far as like on a per-day basis. And then again, Eric Bieniemy runs the entire offense. Jack Del runs the entire defense. And then if the players are talking to each other at halftime and trying to motivate each other, and Ron Rivera didn't speak at all, what is he here for? I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. Shouts out to the PFT commenter because he said, quote, every time they cut the Rivera on TV, he's never actually saying anything. There was no fire in the team. I don't even know what the defense is doing, unquote. And that's a good point, man. I'm not the biggest, like, you got to be in players' faces and screaming at them. But, like, the way we were losing, you got to find a way to light a fire under somebody. You got to, I mean, I know Rivera's typically quiet on the sideline, but to be saying nothing, not even to be talking, you don't got to be screaming at people, but to just literally blank face every time the camera looks at you is crazy. And I'm not about how things look. I don't care. Because like the whole Josh Harris thing, him smiling while we were down big, a lot of people had a problem with that. I'm like, well, first of all, he didn't build this team. He just bought it. Why would he be sad that he just bought a whole franchise and is ready to make money off of it and all that stuff? I mean, I know his team is losing that he just purchased, but I mean, Josh Harris doesn't need to sit up there to be sad just for y'all to feel better as fans. But Ron Rivera needs to be doing something as a head coach, like something during that game. So I don't agree with being mad at Josh Harris for smiling and laughing during the game, because I mean, what do you want him to do as an owner today to fix what we got going on? But Ron Rivera, man, you had opportunities during that game to figure something out, to motivate these players, to threaten them something. Moving on, my boy Ref the District brought this up. He said in the Ron Rivera era, Washington has trailed or been tied at halftime in 41 out of 56 games. That's 73%. That's terrible. And he said, read that again. Let's reword it. Ron has coached 56 games in Washington and has led at halftime only 15 of those games. That's absolutely terrible. That makes 0 sense. Zero, man. You can't tell me the grass is greener, man. You can't tell me the grass isn't greener somewhere. I know when you're thinking about firing somebody, you're like, hey, man, at least take the lesser of two evils, the evil that you know. But you can't convince me that only leading at halftime in 15 out of the 56 games you've coached for a team, you could get worse than that. You just can't convince me. But moving on. Since Ron Rivera took over in 2020, Washington has been outscored 295 to 180 points in the first quarter of games, and they have been outscored 744 to 492 in the first half of games. That's why we suck. We always try to come from behind. People say we're a second half team, a fourth quarter team. You're not going to be able to get away with that consistently. It may work every now and then, but it's not going to work more often than it does work. Just to go ahead and let you know that now. These slow starts are going to lose you games more often than you win them. Also, win percentage by season during the Rivera era. We had a .438 year one, a .412 year two, a 500 record in year three. Year four so far, I mean, it's only been 5 games. We've only played 29% of the season, but as of right now, we have the worst win percentage in the Rivera era. But again, if the season were to end today, but it's only 5 games in, so kind of a useless stat, but I just wanted to bring that up just to put everything in perspective. Let's keep going. It had been 12 years since a winless team, 0-4 or worse, led a game by 24 points at halftime. And we found a way to do it last night. I just want to go ahead and put that out there as well. Again, it's been 12 years since somebody has been as bad as the Commanders were last night. Also, Magic Johnson isn't playing. He put out a message. He put out a tweet. He said, get it together. And I love the fact that Magic Johnson is willing to do that, because when we play well, he praises us. And then when we go out there and embarrass him on national television like that, he was in the booth not happy. Now, Josh Harris was smiling all giggles. Magic Johnson never looked happy at any point in that game. So a lot of y'all fans that wanted that reaction from Josh Harris, you definitely got it at Magic Johnson. And immediately after the game was over, he tweeted, tonight the Commanders played with no intensity or fire. I completely agree. We didn't compete in the first half and got down 27-3 heading into halftime. It was too big of a hole to climb out of, and that is why we ended up losing 40-20. So one of his main points is that, first of all, we didn't have any intensity and fire, and we're going to talk about that soon. But also, when you have these slow starts, and that's why I'm bringing up all of these first quarter and first half stats since Ron Rivera has been our head coach, when you dig a hole that deep, it's almost impossible to climb up out of it. It doesn't matter how well you play in the second half. It's almost impossible to climb out of holes that you dig that deep from starting that slow. But again, going back to what I was saying about Magic Johnson's point about us getting outcoached, outplayed, all of that type of stuff, outhearted. I mean, you can blame the coaches for a lot of this stuff too. Yeah, I mean, you can blame Jack Rivera, you can blame Ron Rivera for a lot. But at the end of the day, man, the players literally just got outplayed and out executed. And they also sadly got outdogged. Again, to Magic Johnson's point, they had more heart than us. They clearly wanted to win more than us. RIP Dick Buckus, I don't know if that was enough to motivate them to that level, to turn all of their players to 99 overalls and turn us to negative 35 overalls. But we got to remember that game wasn't even in Chicago. It'd be different if the game was in Chicago and they were feeding off that energy. They were the away team. So again, you can blame the coaches all you want, and we're gonna get to Jack Del Rio later in this video before we move to the defense, but we got to get the entire offense out first, and we're gonna go position group by position group like we always do. But I do need to point out the fact that the players completely got outplayed. They literally just looked like the Bears looked like they wanted it more. They looked like they cared more. You can argue about them being maybe more well prepared, and that's the coaches. But when the game's going, I mean, granted, you can try to make adjustments, but a lot of that was just players losing one-on-ones. Defensive line to their offensive line. Our offensive line versus their defensive line. Our corners versus their wide receivers. Our wide receivers versus their corners. Guys were literally just losing one-on-ones. How can you out-coach that? So again, we can blame Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio for a lot of it, and Eric Bieniemy as well. But when you're getting like completely just the players are just losing their battles, it's nothing you can really do. Shouts out to Kevin Sheehan for this quote on Twitter as well. He said, outplayed, out-hustled, and out-coached. Thursday night football isn't easy, but one team was ready, hungry, and the other one wasn't. Commanders D-torched from the jump. Offense did next to nothing in the first half versus a very bad defense. Let's not forget that. Kicker missed an easy one, which would have put the pressure on the Bears. Just a terrible night overall. All facets of the game, man. I mean, and also, shouts out to my boy Disco, because he pointed out the fact that, hey, man, the timing of that Magic Johnson tweet was very interesting. Because you see him highly upset in that booth, and you got to think about the fact that Magic has done a lot of winning throughout his career, not only as a player but as an owner as well. So to watching something he just purchased lose like that on national television, and it's not even necessarily because the Bears were more talented than us, but they just outplayed us, outworked us, they just cared more, they wanted it more. Oh, I know Magic Johnson's heated. So I know he doesn't necessarily control the majority of this team, but I know he's looking around like, hey man, I'm not attached to a lot of these guys, we could really start over type of thing. Also, shouts out to my boy Tay and Todd Podcast for the next few tweets and stats that we bring up, because these are great points. The Commanders could have been playing the Chiefs, Dolphins, 49ers tonight and been down 27-3 at half, and then losing 40-20, and I still would have been upset. That would have been completely unacceptable. But then the fact that you did it against the 0-4 Bears, that had the 0-14 Bears dating back to last season on primetime, everybody watching, is insane. Also, Tay and Todd Podcast pointed out Ron drafted or signed 18 of the 22 starters on this team. This is the team he built, literally. So who else do you put the blame on? The same team that just got destroyed in front of the whole country, 40-20 against an 0-14 team. Oh, and also the 4 players that he didn't draft to sign are arguably some of the 4 best players on the team, which is crazy right now. You can basically say the 5 best starters on the team are Terry McLaurin, Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, Montez Sweat, and Chase Young. Ron Rivera is only responsible for one of them, and that was Chase Young, which was like the obvious pick you make at number 2. I mean, now looking back, I mean, a lot of people would say Justin Herbert, but at the time, Chase Young made a lot of sense. And Chase Young balled out. Before we even get to the defense, I want to go ahead and point out the fact that this loss isn't on Chase Young at all. We're going to dive into why Chase Young had arguably one of the best defensive end performances against the Bears last night than any defensive end has had over the past few years. Like, period. Even better than some Micah Parsons performances. Even though Khalil Mack had 6 sacks last week, he didn't get as many pressures as Chase Young had last night. Bro, Chase Young had a ridiculous night, but sadly nobody cares about it because of how bad we lost. Well, don't blame this on Chase Young. But again, Ron Rivera, so far out of all of our best players, Ron Rivera only picked one of them. One of them was an obvious pick in Chase Young, and even him, there's been turmoil with that. But now my main point is Chase Young has bounced back. Going back to Ron Rivera, man, shouts out my boy Disco for this quote too as well. I agree. I'm sure Ron will go on a run at some point this season. We'll be in the in the hunt graphic until we're not. I completely agree with that. I'm really afraid of that. That's one of my biggest fears. Again, I hate being average more than anything else. I'm like, you either are fighting for the playoffs and you make the playoffs, or you get a good draft pick. That perpetual middle that we've always been is why we never get the top players in drafts. I mean, granted, the draft gets crazy. A lot of top players make it to the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh round, whatever. You don't have to have a top 10 pick to get elite players, but it definitely decreases your chances of getting one of those top players when you consistently have a later pick in the draft. We don't make the playoffs, but we also don't get good picks. And Ron Rivera has this tendency. It's been a pattern. Start slow, and then at some point go on a crazy hot streak, and then as soon as we get those playoff hopes up, as soon as our fans start to believe, okay, we can really turn the season around, we lose the games that we need to win the most at the end. I really hope we don't do that, man. I really don't. I mean, Ron Rivera is so weird because he's basically a floor raiser, but he has a ceiling. Because Ron Rivera took us out of the depths of terrible, out of just being completely useless, and turned us to an average team. But he's also the same head coach that can't take you over the top. And that's what it feels like. You're only going to be so bad under Ron Rivera. You can't be terrible under Ron Rivera. You can be bad. You can be average overall. You can have terrible games, but throughout the course of a season, you're not going to win 4 or less games under Ron Rivera. That's just not going to happen. But at the same time, I also don't see us ever going a season where we only lose 4 games. You're always going to be in that middle to where you don't win 4 or less, and you don't lose 4 or less. So we're just always going to be in that middle. That's just the Ron Rivera way, man. I mean, somehow in a 17-game season last year, an odd number of games, we still found a way to go 500. How do you feel? Like, that's just incredible. His commitment to being average is just second to none right now. Also, man, the inconsistencies are ridiculous because you can't tell me that if we played the Bears the way that we played against the Eagles last week, that we wouldn't have won that game by at least 20. So that's my problem with Ron Rivera teams as well. We not only do we play to the level of our competition, last night we played below the level of our competition. If we play a good team, we try to match them. When we play a bad team, we try to match them. And if anything, we just go under them and lose games we shouldn't lose. And then sometimes win games we shouldn't win. It's just ridiculous. I mean, you just can't convince me that the Bears are 20 points better than the Eagles just based off of back-to-back games. Playing the Eagles, losing by 3 in overtime. Technically, you can almost say that game netted 0 if you just take out overtime. And then losing by 20 points to the Bears. You cannot tell me that the Bears are 20 points better than the Eagles, especially the Eagles in Philadelphia and the Commanders, and then we play the Bears in Maryland. Like, come on now. And I know some people are going to say short week, like as if the Bears didn't have a short week. Like the Bears just play Thursday night every week and they had a whole week to prepare. Like, no, they had a short week just like us. So there's no excuses there. Now moving on to the offense. I feel like we got on Ron Rivera enough. We're like 27 minutes into this recording. We haven't even talked offense or defense yet. Specifically. Let's really dive into it though. Eric Bieniemy, I loved what I saw at times. You got in your bag at times, but overall it was not a great day. I'm gonna go ahead and say that front and center right now. I mean, we picked up our first down of the day a few minutes into the second quarter. I pointed that out during the live stream. That's crazy. They had more touchdowns than we had first downs at one point. Now that's bad on defense, but that's also really bad on offense. The Bears had allowed 25 plus points in 14 straight games, and look at us to come in and stop that streak with them only giving up 20 points against us. That's crazy. And even with the Joey Slye missed field goal, that only would have been 23. We still would have ended that streak. Also, you know something is terribly wrong when Jamison Crowder is your highest rated offensive player by Pro Football Focus. Andrew Wiley's your second highest, and Charles Leno is your third highest. You have old bring back Jamison Crowder from out of nowhere, and I love him as a player, but he shouldn't be your number 1 rated player by Pro Football Focus at the end of a game ever. That sounds like if you would have told me before the game started, Jamison Crowder is going to be your highest rated overall player on offense by the end of this game, especially with an 82.3 grade. It'd be different if he was like in the 90s or something. An 82.3 overall grade. I would have told you, yeah, we lost. I don't know how we lose, but we lost. And then if you would have told me on top of all of that, Andrew Wiley and Charles Leno are second and third, according to Pro Football Focus, I'm like, yeah, we lost that game, man. Well, I ain't gonna lie, we lost that one. Also, the Washington Commanders dropped back to pass the ball 55 straight times without a designed run after the 8-minute 49-second mark in the second quarter, all the way until we ended the game. Literally from 8 minutes 49 seconds left in the second quarter to the end of the game, we only ran pass plays. If there was ever a run, it was because Sam Howell took off on his own. That's it. That's incredible, man. I mean, poor Sam Howell back there having to drop back that many times. And I mean, you can blame the defense for a lot of that because we were so far behind, but 55 straight? That is the most for any team that Pro Football Focus has even data for us going back to 2006. No other team has basically ran 55 straight pass plays since Pro Football Focus has existed in 2006. Again, we're doing here historical things, not in a good way. Also, one of my biggest gripes with Eric Bieniemy last night, and I know at this point, the point that I'm bringing this up at is that the game we were already so far behind. Again, a lot of that is on the defense, but the offense takes some blame as well, because just like how our defense was giving up points, how about our offense go back and score those exact same points back? So just because our defense was worse than our offense doesn't mean our offense wasn't also bad. So Eric Bieniemy, you take a lot of blame for it. I liked a lot of things that you did, you and Sam Howell, but both y'all had a lot of positives and also a lot of negatives, and probably even more negatives than positives. We're gonna get there though. But my main point is, towards the end of the game, the whole Bears secondary was hurt. There was nobody left. My dog Tyreek Stevenson was out there on the island. He was a Georgia Bulldog. He went to Miami right before he went to the draft. But still a rookie. Like, we're talking about rookies. Like, Emmanuel Forbes is starting for us because we knew that heading into the regular season. The Bears had rookies starting in their secondary due to injuries, not because, we drafted this guy to start immediately. They just had injuries, and it was like, well, now we gotta play the rookies. We got to play the backups. And so, like, at that point, why are we throwing the ball behind the line of scrimmage consecutively late in the game instead of attacking their secondary and allowing Sam Howell to get beat up like that? Just call a quick slant, something. There's nobody back there to cover. They're blitzing us, and even if they weren't blitzing us, there's a whole bunch of backups in the secondary. Why are we not attacking their secondary down the field, at the very least for short yardage throws and potentially putting them in yards after catch situations, rather than throwing it behind the line of scrimmage to where Brian Robinson makes the best catch of his life at the time we don't want him to, because it's a -4 loss. But if he would have just not caught it, it would have been the clock stops and we don't lose 4 yards, and then we go back again, throw it to Antonio Gibson behind the line of scrimmage, and he just completely lets it go through his hands. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Also, good point from Charles Leno at the end of the game. He basically talked about how he was worried about the hit Sam Howell was taking at a certain point in the game, because, I mean, we were down 17 with 3 minutes left. I know you're trying to get Sam Howell his confidence back and, let him go out there, make some throws and stuff like that. I see the logic there, but I agree with Charles Leno, man. Down 17 with 3 minutes left. Why are you asking Sam Howell to basically take more hits? I think before, like, 3 minutes left in the game, I think Sam Howell had only been sacked like 2-3 times, which is not great overall, but it's good compared to what we've been doing so far this season. And for some reason, under that last 3 minutes, the Bears got like 2 or 3 more sacks, and they only had like 2 or 3 sacks before then. So it's just like we were just putting Sam Howell through unnecessary punishment. We need you the entire season is basically the point that Charles Leno is making. And like down 17-3, I see what you're trying to do, Eric Bieniemy, but it's just not worth it. So I agree with that. So Eric Bieniemy, I'm looking at you a little sideways for that as well. But of course, I'm also just completely looking at you sideways for this overall offensive performance. Now moving on to Sam Howell. Of course, he threw for 300 yards for the first time in his young career. That's exciting. And aside from his interception in the middle of the field, which is, difficult for short quarterbacks to make, and he actually does a pretty good job of throwing over the middle of the field usually, especially in terms of short quarterbacks, as far as short quarterbacks go. He played a decent game overall, went 28 of 38 with a couple of touchdowns, and some of those incompletions were really throwaways, so he kind of technically went like 28 of like 34, which sounds good on the surface. You would think that's a great game, but at the same time, that interception was really bad, man. That was a killer. That was really, like, when we needed our offense the most in the first half, he threw that terrible interception to set the Bears up to get more points immediately afterwards. And also, a really interesting stat, the Bears, the only quarterbacks the Bears have intercepted this season before they intercepted Sam Howell was Blaine Gabbert. So is Sam Howell in the same boat as Blaine Gabbert? Statistically, he is, according to that right there. Also, even though Sam Howell played well in the second half, he was pretty bad in the first, dog. Pretty bad. I mean, overall, he was pretty good. But boy, I mean, even outside of that interception, that deep bomb to De'Ami Brown that could have been a touchdown was on him. I was screaming it during the live stream, man. If you just underthrow him, that's a touchdown. The worst thing you can do right there is overthrow him. So just underthrow it. Don't put so much on it. Don't try to put the perfect ball on a receiver open by at least 10 yards. Like, that was really bad. That one was like, all right, Sam Howell, you're tripping. He started throwing dots later in the game, but that one was like, come on, man. Maybe that play right there completely turns the game around. Our defense gets motivated, and they don't continue to get bullied by the Bears. You never know, man. And then the missed throw to Jahan Dotson before the Joey Slob miss later in the game as well. Late in the game. I mean, he had great moments. Again, he had great moments, but he also had some really bad moments, man. So I don't want to hear about, oh, poor Sam Howell. The defense let him down. Again, I agree that the defense was worse than the offense. You can argue maybe even way worse, but that doesn't necessarily mean the offense was good or great. The offense was still bad overall, in my opinion, especially really bad at times, including Sam Howell and including Eric Bieniemy. So the defense was worse, but the defense wasn't just so much worse that, oh man, poor Sam Howell. No, Sam Howell was out there throwing the game away at times too, man. If your quarterback goes 6 for 9 for 36 yards and an interception against the worst pass defense in the entire NFL, through a certain course of that game, you're terrible. You're bad. I'm sorry, Sam Howell. You had a terrible first half. A lot of that was on Eric Bieniemy as well. Logan Thomas fumbling doesn't help, but hey, man, we got to do better. I mean, also at the end of the day, man, shouts out my boy Rio, because 3 whole points were scored in the first half. The quarterback and the offensive coordinator weren't good by any means tonight either. Lots of blame pie to go around. Instead of forcing fetch to happen, it's okay to accept said truths. I agree, man. That narrative that Sam Howell just absolutely balled out and like the defense let him down, I don't agree with that. Again, the defense was worse than the offense, but man, the offense was really bad, especially at times as well, including Sam Howell. I loved what I saw from Sam Howell by the end of the night. There's definitely some things that make you optimistic about the future, but it just completely isolating yesterday's game, not thinking about the future, not thinking about the past, just only putting last night's game into a vacuum. Sam Howell made me mad a lot, quite often in that game. But at the same time, man, we could talk about this whole team not having heart. We could talk about a lot of the team not having heart. One guy that did have heart was Sam Howell, man. He had a couple of runs where he broke like multiple sacks behind the line of scrimmage, broke multiple tackles ahead of the line of scrimmage, and it was even at one point he had to run over Charles Leno and literally ran him over, like completely like bulldozed him. Charles Leno falls on his back, Sam Howell falls forward, and basically Charles Leno tackled Sam Howell on a great run that could have potentially ended up being a first down. Maybe we end up with a touchdown instead of a field goal that drive. So Charles Leno made me mad there, even though that's not really his fault. But man, if anybody had heart, it was Sam Howell. That man was doing some things behind the line of scrimmage, avoiding pressure, getting rid of potential sacks with these 300-pound men grabbing onto him. He's not even 6 foot tall completely, about 220 maybe, if that. Some of the things he was doing back there, that was pure heart. I mean, you can argue about talent, you can argue about strength and stuff, but if anything, that was just pure heart. So, hey man, somehow I appreciate you for, if anything, just having the most heart out of our entire team yesterday. And it shouldn't be like that. You shouldn't be the only one, it seems like. Chase Young had some heart, Sam Howell had some heart, but overall, Sam Howell, not a great game, but optimistic about the future based off of some moments you had. Also going into the running backs, and a lot of this on Eric Bieniemy, but also a lot of this on the defense because we were playing from behind. But again, still Eric Bieniemy, that's ridiculous. Brian Robinson having 6 carries is insane. Like, that's actually pretty crazy. Like, that's wow. So, I mean, that's really all I have for the running backs. Brian Robinson did what he could, even though I do vividly remember one run where like there was a hole open. I think it was like the A gap. And for some reason, he went into the B gap right into Andrew Billings, which is like a free agency signing from the Bears. So shouts out to the Bears for making impactful and notable free agency signings that actually impact wins. It must be nice. But yeah, so there was like a play I remember vividly live. There was like a hole right here. Brian Robinson probably could have went through it for like 5-6 yards maybe. He chose to go right into Andrew Billings for like only like a 1-yard gain, if that. So that made me mad. But other than that, he only had 6 carries. Running backs is a rhythm position. May not be as rhythm dependent as like quarterback, but still, the more carries you get, the better your vision gets. You start to get into a groove. And only 6 carries throughout the entire game. I mean, how much of a groove can you get into? And then, of course, Antonio Gibson made some good plays, but also made some bad plays. Typical Antonio Gibson so far this season. But again, with Brian Robinson only have 6 carries, you just naturally just assume, okay, he only has 6 carries, that means our receivers must have went crazy, right? Like, obviously, if Brian Robinson's only running for 6 carries, Antonio Gibson had less than that, whatever he had, you just assume it, okay, so then Terry McLaurin got a lot of targets, right? At the very least, even if he didn't go crazy, he had a lot of targets, right? Well, think again. We only ran the ball 6 times, and at the same time, Terry McLaurin wasn't targeted much at all. It's incredible. Now, granted, you can maybe blame the turf toe a little bit because he doesn't look like himself right now, but that's still inexcusable. He's your best player. He showed enough against the Eagles last week that you could get him involved early and often, and there's a clear comparison. There's a clear result stats that point to like Terry McLaurin going crazy early in games. We usually end up winning those games, or at the very least have good games like that Eagles game last week. And I mean, it's so bad. You have people out here doing articles about the top 3 teams that should try to trade for Terry McLaurin. That's how rock bottom it feels around here. These are non-Commanders fans writing these articles too. These are people that are just national neutral analysts that are like, man, we got to save Terry McLaurin. He deserves better. That's how bad this team looks right now. Poor Terry McLaurin. The way people are saying poor Sam Howell, they need to put that energy towards Terry McLaurin, because Sam Howell, even though he was better than the defense, that's not saying much. But Terry McLaurin, he definitely deserves better. Terry McLaurin has 257 receiving yards through 5 games. DJ Moore had 230 last night alone. That's ridiculous. DJ Moore only has 27 less yards than Terry McLaurin has all season just in that one game last night. That makes absolutely no sense. We brought in Eric Bieniemy to do the thing that Scott Turner refused to do, and that's get the ball to his best players as often as possible. Other teams are still doing it. It doesn't matter how much a team focuses on stopping Justin Jefferson. It doesn't matter if he's double teamed or not. He gets the ball all of the time. It doesn't matter that even though we went to that Eagles game knowing that A.J. Brown was arguably their best receiver, he still went crazy. For some reason, we just can't seem to do that with Terry McLaurin and our guys. I don't know. Eric Bieniemy did it a couple of times this season, but not consistently enough. You would think, okay, so Terry McLaurin, you know what I'm saying, without receiving a lot of targets, maybe he just didn't play much. Nah, Terry McLaurin was out there quite a bit, man. My boy Terry McLaurin was out there for 83% of snaps. He was out there for 58 snaps. The most out of any offensive player besides the offensive line and the quarterbacks, who are players that play every snap regardless of what's going on, unless there's an injury. So outside of the guys who play 100% of snaps, 100% of games, that's just an automatic, Terry McLaurin had the most snaps out of any player on our offense. That's so like Brian Robinson only carries the ball 6 times. Terry McLaurin has the most snaps on our offense outside of the obvious guys that are supposed to play every snap. So what's going on? You know what I'm saying? Please. I mean, the Commanders passed the ball more in one game than I can ever remember, and Terry McLaurin still only had 5 targets. Not 5 catches, 5 targets. That's like phenomenally bad. That's wonderfully terrible. It's like historical stuff, man. Also, shouts out to Next Gen Stats for pointing this out, and you can blame this on the receivers, you can blame this on Eric Bieniemy, whatever. I'm more so gonna blame it on the receivers, I guess, overall. And I don't necessarily blame a lot of, like, Jahan Dotson, Curtis Samuel, they did what they could. They didn't have great games, but I also don't think this was necessarily their fault. But Next Gen Stats pointed out, of the 12 fastest ball carriers last night, only 3 of them involved players from the Commanders. So out of all of the 12 fastest ball carriers, like the 12 fastest plays where a guy was running with the ball on offense, only 3 of them involved Commanders players. And of the 3, the fastest was Jamison Crowder. Jamison Crowder, again, our highest graded offensive player from the game. And I mean, almost at this point, an elder statesman. That's ridiculous, man. Come on, weapons. A lot of the blame goes to the defense. Of course, the most of the blame goes to the defense. A lot of it goes on Eric Bieniemy. A lot of it goes on Sam Howell. But y'all got to help him out, man. Y'all got to help him out. Also, there was a certain point in the game where Logan Thomas had 10 targets. Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, and Jahan Dotson had 10 targets combined. And I mean, I don't really have much to say about the tight ends, but I mean, it's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time that after Logan Thomas touched the ball that many times that he's due to fumble. I literally felt it. Like, by the time he had like his 8th target, I was like, oh, here we go. And you could just feel it. That play where he was running for yards after the catch, yards after contact, you could just feel him fighting for those extra yards. You could just feel the fumble was coming. And then when it happened, it was like, of course, I wasn't even mad. It was like I could literally tell it was going to happen. You could foresee it. And then also offensive line, I actually don't really blame this game on them that much. I felt like they actually did a pretty decent job. Now, granted, the Bears had 2 sacks total this entire season before coming into this game, and then they got 5 last night alone. So they more than doubled their season total just last night, which is terrible. But you got to take into the account that the defense was bad, and so we always had to pass. Again, you can blame some of that on Eric Bieniemy, that we ran 55 pass plays in a row to end the game from midway of the second quarter on to the end of the game. But at the same time, man, when you pass that much, you're due to give up more sacks. Typically teams don't allow as many sacks because they don't pass the ball 55 times in a row. First of all, just law of averages, law of statistics, if you pass the ball more, you're statistically more liable to end up getting sacked more often. You're in situations to get sacked rather than running the ball. Also, on top of that, to dive in deeper, if the defense knows you're throwing the ball all of the time, they're pinning their ears back and rushing the passer rather than that slight hesitation that they have to have if your offense is balanced, because they don't know if you're running the ball or passing it. If you're running the ball, they got to be a little hesitant. They got to watch out. They got to set the edge. But if they know for a fact you're passing the ball, they're doing nothing but trying to get to the quarterback. They're not even paying attention to the running back. They're not hesitating at all. And that makes it easier for them to do their jobs and get pressure on the quarterback and get some sacks. So, it's just like a lot of it. It's like a domino effect from the defense being so bad while the offense struggles so much. And that's one of them. The reason we gave up so many sacks. You can blame it on the defense in a way because of that, how far behind we got. But also, again, no excuses to the offense, because when you end up behind, that not only means your defense is giving up points, that also means your offense isn't scoring points. So when the Bears are up a ridiculous amount of points, 20-something points at one time, not only does that mean your defense is giving up a lot of points, but that means your offense isn't scoring any points. So it's blame to go all the way around. But again, my main thing is, the offensive line gave up 5 sacks this game against a not good Bears pass rush. But when you throw the ball 55 times in a row, not even 55 plays total, 55 times in a row, from the middle of the second quarter to the end of the game, we ran all pass plays. It's literally just law. It just makes total sense that you're going to end up giving away a few sacks there. It's just, you can't protect everybody all the time. You just can't. Doesn't matter if you're the best offensive line in the NFL. But this leads me to the point, though. Sam Howell has now been sacked 29 times in the first 5 games this year. That puts him on pace to be sacked a record 99 times this season. A record, people, a record. The previous NFL record is 76 by the Texans rookie David Carr in 2002. So right now, the most sack season for a quarterback is 76 in the NFL, out of the entire NFL, and that was done in 2002. Sam Howell, based on the first 5 games and just projection, he's projected to get sacked 99 times to kill that record by 23. Like almost, you add another 30-something% on it. That's ridiculous. And also, the next closest most sacked quarterback this season right now is Daniel Jones with 22. 7 less sacks than Sam Howell. This is terrible. This is really bad, man. Now to Jack Del Rio. And this is going to be fun, man. So the Commanders defense has been pumping draft capital and all kinds of salary cap into this defense. And this is the 4th season under Jack Del Rio. Eric Bieniemy, this is his 1st season. He's only 5 games in to being the offensive coordinator for the Commanders. Sam Howell, this is only his 6th start in for being the quarterback for the Commanders. Offensive line is pretty much entirely new, so we're only 5 games in with that concoction we put together in the offensive line. Jack Del Rio, what is your excuse? Again, I acknowledged earlier that a lot of this was just players getting beat one-on-one. Some things you just couldn't even coach. But at the same time, dog, 4th season, all these draft picks. Remember, our entire D-line is first-round draft picks. We have 1 draft pick on the second level in the linebackers, and we have another first-round draft pick in the secondary in Emmanuel Forbes now. Along with, if you're looking at the entire cornerback group, 1 first-rounder, 2 third-rounders. Linebacker group, a first-rounder, and then the defensive line, 4 first-rounders. There's no excuse. We have 6 first-rounders on defense right now. We have 4 first-rounders all on one. We have a first-rounder at every level, so it's not like you can point to, maybe our weakness is linebackers because we don't have first-rounders there. No, we have a first-rounder there as well, man. Secondary, defensive line, everywhere. What's the excuse? This is an atrocious defensive performance, again, against an injury-ravaged Bears who was 0-4 coming into this game. This is literally the type of stuff that gets you fired. Literally. Jack Del Rio just gave up 37 points to one of the worst offenses in football. And so a lot of people are calling for his head and asking him to be fired right now, man. Washington has given up 33 or more points in the last 4 games after opening the season just giving up 16 to the Cardinals. And we felt bad about that Cardinals game. We were starting to be like, man, is our defense sorry? Man, what I would give up to only allow 16 points at this point in the season. We'd be undefeated if we only allowed 16 points this entire season so far. So, man, hey, we didn't know how good we had it at the end of that Cardinals game, huh? Again, it's a lot of this is on the players, but Jack Del Rio, man, we got to look at you too as well, man. We got to. Because right now we allowed 33 against the Broncos and a come from behind victory. We allowed 37 against the Bills. Now, granted, 7 of those were the offense, somehow interception return for a touchdown. So defensively, we allowed 30 points to the Bills. Still 30. Still 30, still not less than 30. Eagles, 34, even though 3 of them came in overtime. So, at the worst, 31. And then the Bears, 40. Ridiculous. The Commanders have also allowed plays of 58, 56, 39, 34, 32, 23, and 20 yards last night. They gave up points on Chicago's first 5 drives as well. Touchdown, field goal, touchdown, field goal, touchdown. So if they scored a touchdown, they would do for a field goal the next possession. If they scored a field goal, they would do for a touchdown the next possession. It was basically clockwork up to a certain point. Also, the most defensive points allowed in Washington under Jack Del Rio. 43, Week 3, 2021 at Buffalo. 42 points, Week 16, 2021 versus Dallas. And also 40 points last night, Week 5, 2023 versus Chicago. Just to let you know. Jack Del Rio does this. Teams score 40 points on this supposed elite defense quite a bit since Jack Del Rio's been here. Also, the Commanders' takeaways in the first 2 wins, when we started off 2-0, we had 4. In these last 3 games, these last 3 losses, only 1 takeaway. Do you notice a difference? When we don't take the ball away, it gets ugly for us, man. It gets really ugly. And shouts out to my boy Chad Ryan out there in the UK. He brings up a good point. I don't think the new owners will be brave enough to fire a head coach 5 weeks into their administration, but Jack Del Rio absolutely has to go, though. He should have been fired last year. Now there's no excuse, none. He has to go. And again, like I've already said, they're not going to fire Jack Del Rio. First of all, Ron Rivera is too loyal for that. And also, I don't think they're going to fire anybody. It's so early into the season. It's only 5 games in, and I know it's been a terrible 5 games, but they're not going to fire him. Also, shouts out to Mark Bullock, also in the UK. Breaks down a lot of film. Make sure you follow him. He brought up a great point. You can forgive the offense to an extent. Again, they were bad, but they weren't as bad as the defense. Young QB in his 6th start. Naturally going to have his up and downs, and Howell showed fight. Again, he had probably arguably the most heart out of our entire team yesterday. But the defense is in year 4 in the Jack Del Rio to give up 27 points in the first half at home, 40 overall against a 0-4 team is completely disgraceful. I mean, come on, dog. Last week, A.J. Brown went so stupid against us that the NFL drug tested him after the game. Come on, dog. And then this week, DJ Moore put up the 2nd highest fantasy point total for a Thursday night game in NFL history. The only person to have more than him in a Thursday night game is Corey Dillon back in Week 15, 1997. That's it. Again, we're historically bad. We're doing things that teams haven't done since the 90s. It's that bad. And also, it's been 57 years since the Commanders have been lit up by a wide receiver for as many yards as DJ Moore went for last night. 57 years. Is this arguably the worst defense the Commanders have had in 57 years? I refuse to believe it. I refuse. Also, Justin Fields had 282 passing yards and only 3 different Bears receivers caught a pass. You had DJ Moore with 230 yards, Cole Kmet with 42 yards, and Robert Tonyan with 10 yards. Those are the only 3 players that caught passes from the Bears. I just want to emphasize that only 3 guys, only 3 receivers between the receivers and tight ends caught passes from Justin Fields for the Bears last night. We couldn't stop 3 guys. We couldn't. And also, to emphasize it, 2 of those are tight ends. So that means that DJ Moore was the only wide receiver that caught passes for the Bears last night. And our defense looked that bad and their offense looked that good. Equinemius St. Brown had 1 target, no catches. Khalil Herbert had 3 targets, no catches as a running back. And Darnell Mooney had 4 targets with 0 catches. So DJ Moore was the only receiver catching passes, the only wide receiver, and they had 2 other tight ends catch passes for even less receptions than DJ Moore had himself. We couldn't stop 3 people yesterday, y'all, in the receiving game. Jack Del Rio, come on, dog. I know, again, I blame the players for a lot of it. I know a lot of people are only blaming Jack Del Rio. That's not fair. The players were really bad out there. Again, they were losing a lot of one-on-ones to where it's just like, what can Jack Del Rio even draw up to fix some of these things? But at the same time, Jack Del Rio, that's ridiculous. A lot of this is on you as well. Shouts out to my boy Mark Bullock for here. He has a nice tweet thread breaking down everything that he witnessed from the game. I completely agree with everything he said. And rather than trying to reword it, why not I just read it word for word and give him a shout out? Because this is beautifully explained. He said on Twitter, quote, Finished watching all 22 of the Commanders defense last night from against the Bears. Game plan from Del Rio was pretty clear. Wanted to load the box and stop the run, force Fields to beat them as a passer. Abandoned normal too high zone coverages that we normally do. Played man coverage pretty much all game. DJ Moore then proceeded to burn each cornerback in different ways. Didn't matter which corner we put on him, he just burnt them all. Del Rio occasionally tried to switch back to the typical too high zone stuff, but the problem was that it left the light box versus the run. So anytime we did that, the Bears just ran the ball, and there was nothing we could do to stop the run. They were running it right up the middle, out of shotgun, for it seemed like at least 9 yards every time, minimum. Like that was the most just like, what are we doing? We're just getting punched in the mouth type of stuff. The Bears instantly ran the ball right at Cody Barton, and Washington could not stop it. Thanks a lot, Cody Barton. So Del Rio loaded the box again, and then stuck with man coverage behind it, and guess what? The Bears went right back to passing the ball and killing us. Even when they benched Forbes and brought in Danny Johnson, they left him in man coverage versus DJ Moore, and he immediately got beat on a double move that luckily Justin Fields over. And that's the crazy thing. I was pointing that out during the live stream, live during the game. This could be way worse. Justin Fields was overthrowing and missing open receivers often. We benched Emmanuel Forbes, threw Danny Johnson in there. Danny Johnson gets beat the immediate next play for what should have been a touchdown if Justin Fields didn't overthrow the receiver. Crazy. So Mark Bullock finishes, understand the desire to stop the run, but if DBs can't play man coverage, then you just gonna have to allow the run. And so it's better to die, giving up the run up until the point that we get into the red zone, then you focus on stopping the run, and maybe you can stop them from scoring touchdowns. You just give them field goals rather than allowing 40 points the whole game. That's just ridiculous. Allowing them to just kill us whenever they wanted to in the passing game. And again, just from that breakdown alone, Jack Del Rio was out there playing defense as if we had prime Deion Sanders and Ty Law and Champ Bailey in our secondary, man. I had to shout out Champ Bailey because he's a Georgia Bulldog. I got to at least throw him back there. Darryl Green back there or something. You know what I'm saying? That's crazy. And also at the end of that, you could be pretty much sure that if we don't fix what we need to do, we're gonna give up 70 to the Dolphins eventually as well. Remember, we played the Dolphins this season, who put up 70 against the Broncos, and the Broncos put up 30 something against us. So if we don't fix what we need to fix, week 13, that Dolphins game, please don't give up 70. Also, the Commanders sadly have a defensive-minded head coach in Ron Rivera, and also a former head coach who's now a defensive coordinator. So we have a defensive-minded head coach and a defensive coordinator who used to be a head coach. And somehow we've used 5 of our 7 picks in the top 2 rounds under this era on first round on defense alone. And we're 30th in yards allowed, 29th versus the run, 28th versus the pass, 23rd in interception rate, 20th in third down rate, but at least we're 6th in sacks. I mean, hey, we're 6th in sacks. At least we, nothing else is working, but at least we get into the quarterback, kinda. We didn't get to him much yesterday, though, as far as sacks go. Also, but the saddest part about what we had going on with Jack Del Rio, and again, of course you can blame this on the players, but at the end of the day, you got to blame it on the coaches because it's up to them. I know these are grown men, and I've always say it like, why does it take a coach to motivate you to play well? If you're a grown man in the NFL making millions of dollars, why do you need another grown man to motivate you? But at the same time, man, this quote from Tevin Jenkins is very telling on how much of a lack of motivation that this team showed playing under Jack Del Rio and Ron Rivera last night. They clearly did not play for their coaches. He said, quote, like safety rotations, false rotations, all of that. They'd go like cover 2, then it was like a false cover 2, and they show 1. One comes back, fills the hole, fills the gap. Couple times they were trying to give false looks, and it seemed like some of the guys either weren't aware or they were just being lazy about making the shift, and that led to some really open plays for us, unquote. So that's why we were struggling at stopping the run right there, because guys didn't know what was going on. They were moving lazily. Again, that's on the players, that's on Jack Del Rio, and that's on Ron Rivera. All of which, it's just all of the above, man. Also, man, if you're thinking about firing Jack Del Rio, keep this in mind. I guess you could technically promote Steve Russ to interim defensive coordinator, and then you move Ryan Kerrigan, the linebackers coach, maybe. But at the end of the day, shouts out to Mitchell Tisler for pointing this out. Juan Castillo is the only other coach on this Commander staff that has NFL experience as a defensive coordinator, and he's coaching the offensive line. Like, that's it. That's crazy. So I don't even see where we could go internally if we fire Jack Del Rio, who would step up and even become that next defensive coordinator. Again, you could try to do Steve Russ, but technically our offensive lines coach right now is the only one that has any experience being some type of a defensive coordinator, which is insane. All right, now moving on to the defensive line. I thought Montez Sweat was going to have a fantastic game. He had that 1 sack in the first quarter. I thought, oh, man, he's about to go crazy, man. And he had some more moments, but overall it wasn't the dominant day that I thought he would have. But you know who did have a dominant day? Chase Young. And I'm not even mad at him. I don't know if y'all noticed at the end of the game, he didn't shake anybody's hand. While everybody's huddling up, meeting at the middle of the field, shaking hands, saying, what's up, good game, and all of that, Chase Young by himself is just walking to the locker room like, I'm not talking to none of y'all. I'm not nothing. And he has every right. First of all, let me show you the clip right now, but he has every right because the game he had and to lose the way that we lost, especially the way that the defense performed overall, and he had a ridiculous game. We're going to dive into the stats. He has every right to feel this way. This is Chase Young right here, man. Look at him at the bottom of the screen. So in a game with a lot of negatives, and I repeat, a lot of negatives, Chase Young was one of the very few bright spots. He had 11 pressures in last night's game to the Bears. That's the most pressures a player has had in a single game so far this season. Literally, out of anybody. Nick Bosa, even Khalil Mack had 6 sacks last week. He didn't have 11 pressures in that game. Chase Young now has the single most pressures in the game out of any defensive player in the NFL so far this season. I mean, he had a game. And all the while, he should have had a sack, but Justin Fields just threw the dumbest pass out of bounds that was clearly intentional grounding, but for some reason the refs didn't call it. And so that should have been another sack for Chase Young. He only ended up with 1 sack by the end of the game. He should have had 2 because, I mean, Justin Fields literally getting sacked by Chase Young. Just threw the ball anywhere. Didn't care where it went. Didn't even try to aim at a receiver. It's crazy they didn't call that an intentional grounding. And if you call those intentional groundings, you stop quarterbacks from doing stuff like that, rule bending and getting away with stuff like that, because that was a sack that Chase Young earned. Honestly, he completely beat the tackle, got to Justin Fields. Justin Fields just bailed himself out, and the refs allowed him to do it, but it is what it is. So Chase Young last night had 11 pressures and 1 sack. Again, should have 2 in my opinion. 7 hurries, crazy. 3 QB hits, crazy, and then the 1 sack. He won 41.7% of his true pass rush snaps. That is crazy stuff, man. He is literally playing at an extremely high level right now. Like, he's arguably our best player, at the very least on defense, from what I've seen so far these first few weeks. At the very least against the Bears, he was our best defender easily by far, in my opinion. I mean, he did all of that. Again, 11 pressures, 7 hurries, 3 hits, 1 sack, in just 29 pass rush snaps. Like, if we would have won this game, everybody would have been talking about how dominant Chase Young is and how he's back and everything, him being worth the number 2 overall pick finally. If we would have won the game, that would have been the whole narrative. It would have been Sam Howell and Chase Young. That's it. If we would have ended up winning that game. He had one of those games that, man, it sucks that we lost, and especially the way that we lost, because it's one of those games to ESPN, First Take, everybody would have been talking about Chase Young. All the while getting held like this on several plays. This is how he got held on one of the touchdown passes to DJ Moore, and this was not called. And there were other plays like this where it wasn't called all game. Like, what is he supposed to do, dog? Like, honestly, like, please tell me, looking at this picture right now, what is Chase Young supposed to do about this? This is literally illegal. Thanks, refs. Also, looking at the entire defensive line, Chase Young had 7 hurries, 3 QB hits, and technically half a sack, but kind of 1 sack. Montez Sweat had 2 hurries, 2 sacks. Deron Payne had 2 QB hits, 1 hurry. Jonathan Allen had 1 QB hit, 1 sack, 1 hurry. So not a great game from Jonathan Allen. When you look at Pro Football Focus and how they rated our defensive players, Deron Payne was the highest rated with an 86 grade. Chase Young was second with an 83.1. Montez Sweat was third with a 78.7. James Smith-Williams was fourth with a 63. So it goes from Montez Sweat 78.7 to the 4th best being 63. Benjamin St-Juste with a 62.7, our 5th highest. Everybody else is below that and terrible. That's terrible. Linebacker wise, Jamin Davis, I'm gonna have to look at the all 22 to see what happened with him, because I didn't feel like he was as great against the run. But I'm not sure how much was his fault. Pro Football Focus graded him a 53. That's not good at all. But at the same time, Cody Barton was a 39.8. And that may even be too high from what I saw from him yesterday. The Bears literally attacked him. Run game, passing game. He allowed touchdowns and coverage to tight ends. He allowed first downs and coverage to tight ends. And they literally ran the ball right at him. And he allowed it. He went for it. So he ended the game with a 39.8 overall grade against the Bears. It's just ridiculous. So at this point, I'm like, bruh, I'm not saying that Khalil Hudson or Jabril Cox are guaranteed better than Cody Barton, but at this point, is there any way that they can be worse? You know what I'm saying? Like, why is Jabril Cox still on the practice squad? Why is Khalil Hudson inactive going into games? Why do we not play him? There's no way you convince me. You can convince me that Khalil Hudson And my boy Jabril Cox, who I've wanted us to get since he was at North Dakota State with Trey Lance. Then he transferred to LSU. Then the Cowboys ended up getting him later in the draft a couple of years ago. And then he's on our practice squad right now. There's no way you can convince me that those guys are worse than Cody Barton. Are they better? That's yet to be seen. But can they possibly be worse? You can't convince me. Now, Cody Barton is the quarterback of the defense. He's the one that wears the headset. He has the green dot on his helmet. So when Jack Del Rio's calling in plays to the defense, he's the one telling everybody what the play is, where they need to be, and all of that type of stuff. So he does that, I guess, fairly well. I don't even know there. I mean, you got to be in the headset to know that. So it's like, if he doesn't do that, and if we would have replaced him, who would step up and do that? I guess Jamin Davis. But we saw last year, Jamin Davis is worse when he has to worry about being the quarterback of the defense and the middle linebacker. He plays better as an outside linebacker. He looks way better this year than he looked last year, taking over as the Mike linebacker spot with the green dot on his helmet while Cole Holcomb was hurt. That's one of the main reasons we brought in Cody Barton, to be the quarterback of the defense. So thank you for doing everything you're supposed to do vocally and mentally, Cody Barton. But physically, you're so bad it doesn't even matter. So do we ask Khaleke Hudson and Jabril Cox to step up and be the Mike linebacker? Khaleke Hudson, who, I mean, he's been here for forever, but he doesn't have enough playing experience for you to necessarily trust him being your starting Mike linebacker, green dot on the helmet, calling the plays for the defense, being the quarterback of the defense. And then Jabril Cox at the same time just got here. He probably doesn't even know the defense, and that's probably why he's still in the practice squad, because you can't convince me talent and athleticism-wise Jabril Cox is a practice squad player. He's easily one of our 4 best linebackers physically. Easily. You could argue up there with Jamin Davis for 1 or 2. Honestly, like literally. So it just has to be that. Now moving on to the cornerbacks. They asked Rivera in the press conference at the end of the game, what was the thought process in benching Emmanuel Forbes? He said, quote, thought process was that he was struggling. We were hoping he'd bounce back from last week, and we felt at the point in the game it was time to make a move, unquote. And honestly, I feel like they benched him because of just lack of effort, because there were a couple of times when he had to step up and make a tackle, he didn't even really try. He didn't put his body into it or nothing. He just tried to grab him like this, like as if that would work. And remember, that's why William Jackson got benched against the Tennessee Titans, and then, you know, the rest is history. It was because of a lack of effort. Not necessarily getting beat, but just a lack of effort. And Emmanuel Forbes did show a lack of effort at times, but if we're talking coverage, I don't think he was that bad. Now, granted, through 5 games, Emmanuel Forbes allowed the most yards in coverage out of any corner in the NFL with 401. In the last 2 weeks alone, 12 catches off of 16 targets, 273 yards and 2 touchdowns. But and even as bad as that is, nobody else was better. Nobody else in our cornerback group is better, but we'll get there. Before we leave Emmanuel Forbes alone, shouts out to Darius Slade, man. He's a cool guy. He's always shouting out Terry McLaurin, and he even offered some advice to Emmanuel Forbes after the game. He tweeted to him, keep your head up, Forbes. I was benched back-to-back games my rookie year, so just keep working. You're going to be great. And that's a good point. I mean, technically, Emmanuel Forbes has only been benched once, so technically he's not even off to as bad of a start as Darius Slade had in his career. Look at Darius Slade now. He's Terry McLaurin food, but he's still a pretty good corner. So shouts out to, he didn't have to tweet that. Also, the fact that he tweeted on that play where DJ Moore beat Emmanuel Forbes on a comeback route, and that was one of the last times I remember seeing Emmanuel Forbes even play in the game, play coverage, guard DJ Moore at all. I'm not going to lie, man. That was kind of a push-off, and Darius Slade called it. He said, DJ is having a monster game. I admit that. But, man, is that an offensive pass interference, or am I tripping? Because it's already hard to guard these dudes. If they can do that, man, it's going to be a long year for us DBs. That's what Darius Slade said, looking at that play against Emmanuel Forbes. DJ Moore did like push off a little bit on the comeback route, get open for the first down. But then again, the lack of effort for Emmanuel Forbes to even make the tackle there at the end of it, and then he ended up getting yards. Thank goodness he stepped out of bounds on that play. But again, benching Emmanuel Forbes for Danny Johnson to go cover DJ Moore one-on-one man coverage is absolutely a terrible decision, Jack Del Rio. Like, I know you're trying to send a message to Emmanuel Forbes, but sending Danny Johnson to cover DJ Moore out there one-on-one is terrible. Again, like I already said earlier, we benched Emmanuel Forbes. The next play that Danny Johnson had to cover DJ Moore one-on-one in man coverage, DJ Moore beat him with a double move so bad that Justin Fields had to overthrow DJ Moore by like 4 yards for it to not be a touchdown. Crazy. So now it's time to talk about the draft class, because Emmanuel Forbes got benched, right? That's our first round pick. What about the other picks? Maybe, a first round pick got benched. Maybe it's not that bad. Maybe the 2023 draft class just can't be that bad. Well, looking at it after a 20-point loss last night, Quan Martin did not play. Strongberg did not play. So second, third round pick did not play. Fourth round pick Braden Daniels did not play. He's on IR, and I don't even think he's that hurt. I think he's just so raw and not ready to play in games that, again, once he had the slightest of boo-boos, they was like, nah, we need to put you on IR, stow you away because we want to develop you, but you're completely unplayable right now. That's our fifth round pick. KJ Henry, inactive. Chris Rodriguez did not play because he was sick. And then, of course, Andre Jones, the offseason all-star, didn't play. At a certain point in that game, none of our draft picks were playing. After Benjamin St. Juste was benched, Emmanuel Forbes was benched, none of our draft picks played. That's crazy. I mean, it'd be different if we didn't have first, second, and third round picks. Our first, second, and third round picks aren't playing. Fourth through seventh, you can, maybe they're not starters by the fifth week of the season that they're rookies, but first, second, third round picks, man, come on, dog. But again, you can't be too mad at Forbes because no matter who was covering them, they all got worked by DJ Moore. And again, it was only one receiver, wide receiver, two tight ends, but only one receiver caught a pass all night last night from that performance. Didn't matter if Kendall Fuller, Danny Johnson, or Benjamin St. Juste was covering them. I don't even understand. Like, Kendall Fuller has been ranked a top 5 cornerback according to advanced stats, according to Pro Football Focus grades, every week up until this week. And I don't know what they have him ranked at the end of this game. Maybe we'll find out like a couple of days. But by the time they do all of their rankings and update everything by the end of by the end of Sunday, well, Monday night after that game, Kendall Fuller's not going to be a top 5 corner anymore. Because at a certain point in the game, he had already been beat 3 times on 4 targets by DJ Moore for 2 touchdowns. He was also beat by Darnell Mooney at one point, but Justin Fields overthrew him. Boy, Kendall Fuller. If anything, Kendall Fuller was probably worse than Emmanuel Forbes. At a certain point, he was by the end of the night, he was torched for 3 touchdowns. And then the last one was a crazy one against DJ Moore. And I'm not too mad at that one because at least he was trying to make a play. But golly, man, that 56-yarder to end the game hurt, dog. That was laughably bad. So Kendall Fuller allowed 3 touchdowns. So all of that hate that Emmanuel Forbes was getting, and everybody talked about Kendall Fuller being a top 5 corner in the NFL. How do you feel about that one last night, where Kendall Fuller was even worse than Emmanuel Forbes? And again, going to Benjamin St. Juste, he wasn't better either. I mean, he had some pass deflections, but they were not. I'm gonna call out refs. I'm going to be completely objective. There were some pass interferences that Benjamin St. Juste had that were not called. He was either beat or bailed out by the refs on a lot of plays. He had like 1 or 2 plays I remember him having good coverage. Other than that, man, if he wasn't beat, he was having a pass interference and the refs just simply didn't call it. He was getting there early quite a bit. Shouts out to the refs for allowing Benjamin St. Juste to not look like he had a terrible game. And now moving on to the safety group. My main problem is we just need a pure free safety. I loved what Derek Forrest did for us last year, but right now it just seems like nobody's ever over the top. And I know we ran a lot of cover 1 this past game, and I know we typically run a lot of cover 2, but it just seems like we never have a safety above the receiver. Like, it just seems like the corners playing underneath like they're usually supposed to. I mean, you would hope, ideally, you lock up the receiver no matter whether they go deep underneath. But ultimately, the free safety is the guy that's supposed to be back there to not allow the corner to get beat for 50-something yard bombs. Where's Derek Forrest? Where are any of our safeties? I like what I saw from Cameron Crowe underneath, but I have to look at the all-22 to truly get a good analysis and good feel for what the safety group did overall. But I'm not liking what I'm seeing from Derek Forrest so far this season at all, dog. I'm not. And then special teams wise, I mean, the only comment, Jamison Crowder had a really good punt return. That one punt return, I think it was like after halftime or something, somewhere in the third quarter, I believe. That was such a good punt return. I'm pretty sure Dax Millen is never getting his job back as long as Jamison Crowder is healthy. But Joey Slye, man, you can't miss a 49-yarder, dog. I believe it was a 49-yarder. That's an easy kick for an NFL kicker. If you're in the NFL making millions of dollars, we need you to make that kick. That was a terrible time not to make it because we could have been down 7 points instead of 10, and that's a completely different game. We're only down 1 score instead of 2. That changes our play calling. Maybe that changes the way the defense plays. You never know. So that was a domino effect of just terrible after we missed that kick. That kick literally like just deflated our team. We had so much momentum. He missed that kick, and it's like literally everybody gave up, including the defense. Now, before we get up out of here, somebody on ESPN, I believe it was, brought up a great point that this is the time now to sell Justin Fields, to trade him, whatever you're going to do, because his stock's not going to be any higher than it is right now after back-to-back great games. Do you expect Justin Fields to continue this performance the entire season? Hey, that's up to you. That's a debate topic I'm just throwing out there. But I thought that was a really interesting point. Trade him now. Go ahead and tank for Caleb Williams, and you can end up getting a pretty good high, some first rounders maybe for Justin Fields the way he's playing right now. What stops Atlanta from trading first round picks for Justin Fields right now? And then, that would be crazy. That would be insane. We get whooped by Justin Fields 1 week. The Falcons trade for him, and we got to go against Justin Fields 2 weeks in a row. Oh my God, yo. Also, like I mentioned earlier, my boy Burgundy Blog agrees. He said people are really upset with Josh Harris and the fact that he wasn't crying when the camera was looking at him. But again, he didn't build this team. He bought this team, but he didn't build this team. This is not his fault. So I didn't like that. I didn't like the fact that people want Josh Harris's head for that. Because what you want to do, cry? Because the team he just bought sucks? That's not his fault. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. This is an hour and 15 minutes worth of recording, so I got to edit this down. We'll see how long it ends up being by the time I'm done editing. But yeah, man, I really appreciate y'all. Make sure y'all stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button, so you get notification each and every time I release informative and opinionated videos just like this one. I'm gonna come with more advanced stats and pro football focus grades, like individual grades, and not only just individual grades for players, but like individual metrics, like how good was Charles Leno at pass blocking, how good was he at run blocking specifically, things like that. So be on the lookout for that video in a couple of days as well. And of course, I'm gonna do a big preview breakdown on the Falcons, and that's gonna include a lot of statistics, a lot of important matchups, like what we need to attack on the Falcons, how we can bounce back from that terrible Bears game and get a win against the Falcons in Atlanta. So stay tuned for all of the content, man, because I'm coming with plenty of content. Even though we kind of have like a half of a week off, I'm still coming with crazy videos, so stay tuned for that. And of course, let me know in the comment section, do you agree or disagree with any of my points throughout this video? I know I made a lot of points. Let me know what you agree or disagree with. Let me know anything that I may have missed that you want to talk about. I'm gonna try to be in the comment section and read and reply to every comment that I can. I'm really busy, but I'm gonna try to do the best that I can. And of course, man, if you appreciate these ridiculously long videos, I don't know who else is out here giving out almost an hour 20-minute breakdowns of games, especially a loss like that. Most people just want to give a 7-minute review like, yeah, we suck, and keep it pushing. I almost basically wanted to do what the Family Guy character does, where when they go to the weather report, it's gonna rain. Basically, I just wanted to say we suck and then just end the video after 2 seconds. But hey, man, if you love this type of content, make sure you support the channel any way that you can, because again, YouTube is tripping. So please support the channel if you can. Donate to $RicoScores for all of the work that I'm putting in, or the PayPal WilliamHC94@gmail.com. I really appreciate it. And if you donate at any point when I'm not live streaming, I will make an effort to thank you the next time I live stream or in my next video. Before we start the video, I'll just say shouts out to such and such for donating and while I wasn't live streaming or making a video. So man, I appreciate y'all. Please support the channel if you can. Definitely leave a like on the way out. I'm gonna catch y'all later. I'm out.